started here. So just to let you know, one of our candidates, Matt Raines, is not going to be here tonight. He canceled, so we will only have 3 candidates. So that means everybody gets to take a little bit longer break.
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight. This is the Mineral County Democrat Central Committee Forum for featuring 3 of the candidates that are running for Congressional House District 1. Happy to see you all, and hope this can be an educational and informative forum, which I went to the one in Paradise, and it was. I learned a lot, so that's one of our goals. And if you haven't already, got a white index card and pen to write questions down that you might be interested in hearing the answers to from these candidates. Let Linda know, and she'll get them to you. What will happen with that is, please have them done by the time we take our break, and then they'll be given to Bruce and Cecilia, who will screen the questions, and then we'll ask as many as we have time for. So please don't make them personal or overly personal, and good questions. So I'd like to introduce Bruce Moats. He is our moderator for tonight.
Hi, Bruce.
That's a word for it. So Bruce Moats, he identifies as a left-leaning independent. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Okay. And he is impartial. And this is Cecilia, who is married to Bruce, and she's our timer for tonight.
Thank you, Diane. And again, I just returned I returned to Superior about 2.5 years ago after retiring as an attorney and a journalist, and some folks said I should wear a warning badge on there, journalist turned attorney. But, I was proud to do both. I worked in open government issues, so it's been something I've been involved in my whole life. I lobby on behalf of the Wyoming Press Association at the Wyoming Legislature. So I'm kind of aware of what these folks are trying to get into here and what it's going to take. And I think I would applaud each of them for being willing to put their hat in the ring. And I applaud each of you for being here, because I've heard it probably my whole life that this is maybe the most consequential election ever. Well, I actually believe it this time around. So I'm very glad to see all of you here, and I hope you get out there and get active in talking to your friends and relatives about what's important here. As Diane kind of alluded to, we'll start off giving each candidate 2 minutes to introduce themselves. After that, we'll have some questions that the candidates submitted to us to ask them. They submitted 2 questions. I was appointed to select one of those to give those to them in my infinite wisdom, whatever that is. So the candidate who originated the question will get 3 minutes to answer it, and then the other 2 will get 2 minutes to respond. And then after that, we'll have the break, and hopefully you'll be submitting some questions for Seth and I to review, and then we'll go ahead and ask as many of those as our attention span will allow. So I think we'll start here a little bit different. I think we'll start with Russell Cleveland, if you'll introduce yourself first, and then we'll go to the right and then to the left.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Russell Cleveland. I'm from this little town, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, called St. Regis, Montana. So nice to be here with all my neighbors. I think most of you know me. I'm a dad, I'm a coach. I am a former businessman. I started a child care company in Colorado called Rocky Mountain Kids that I grew to serve over 9,000 families across 42 locations. Became Colorado's largest child care provider, and had a great time doing it. We moved back home to Montana. I grew up originally in the Bitterroot Valley in Stevensville, small farm down there. We have a little ranch here at the end of Mill Creek Road. But moved home in 2021 after the loss of our oldest daughter, Madison, to leukemia. And that is what got me into this race. A little over a year ago, Doge cut pediatric cancer research. And that was my catalyst for deciding to run. There's a lot of things we can do in terms of government efficiency, a lot of things we can choose to fund. But one of the things I feel that we should not be doing is sabotaging our medical research at the expense of tax breaks for the ultra-wealthy. So I got in this fight about a year ago, April 8th of 2025. I've been traveling all over the Western District now for over 12 months. Put on about 53,000 miles on my little Tacoma out there, and have enjoyed every second of it. It's reinstilled my faith in humanity here in Montana. Montanans are much closer than we think, and my whole goal is to make Montana purple again. So thanks for being here tonight. Look forward to get to know you a little bit better. Thanks.
Hey everybody, it's great to be here. Ryan Busse. Sorry, we got a sound technician taking care of things over here. You're in a small town, you got a lot of jobs. One of them is fixing the speaker. I live in Kalispell, just outside of Kalispell with my family. My wife Sarah and Badge are here tonight. I've lived in the valley for 31 years. Sarah and I were married on the banks of the Flathead River 27 years ago. And I am running because I owe this state something. It's made me a better person. I've spent more than 25 years advocating, fighting, doing what many of you have done, knocking doors and holding events and supporting candidates. I didn't come to this lately. I realized early on that this place was worth fighting for, sacrificing for. Not long after I started exploring around Kalispell, I found the Badger 2 medicine, a place that became sacred to me, and that was when the Bush administration was getting to roll a huge industrialization plan into that place. And I was working in the firearms industry. I spent 25 years in the gun industry, and it was a place that wasn't very friendly to progressive or democratic or environmental or conservation ideas. But Montana was more important to me, even than my job, and I started standing up and fighting for Montana at the peril of my job. My job was threatened many times by some of the most powerful political forces in this country, but I never backed down in standing for Montana. I just doubled down on it. I went to work for people like John Tester and Denise Juneau and Steve Bullock, getting these people elected in this state because it was critical for me. I started with the idea that we're going to protect wild places, but this is more than just wild places. It's a state of wonderful people. And I think it's time that Bruce is right, it's time that we stand up and fight for what makes this place so incredibly special. This is the most important election of your lifetime. Glad to see you here tonight, and look forward to answering these questions. Thank you.
Hey y'all, give me a hand if you can't hear me. I break these mics every time I use them anyhow. My name is Sam Forstag. I am also running for Montana's 1st Congressional District. I've spent the last 8 years working as a wildland firefighter for the Forest Service across Montana and across the West. The last 4 working as a smoke jumper, and the last 2 as a leader in my union's local, the National Federation of Federal Employees, at a time when I'm sure I don't have to tell anybody here, it was a hell of a time to be leading a federal employees union. We lost about a quarter of the Forest Service in this state just last year between Doge cuts and all the rest. And most of the people that they fired here in Montana in the Forest Service were making less than $20 an hour. And they said it was all about efficiency, and there's not a lot that's more efficient than somebody swinging a tool for 15 or 16 bucks an hour to make sure you can make it up a road to the trailhead and up a trailhead to the forest. And when we reached out to our congressperson, I got nothing but crickets over and over again. So I decided if they're going to come take all of my coworkers' jobs, I'm going to come take theirs. And I think things are looking a little bit brighter every day in terms of doing that. I'm sure you all know that Ryan Zinke dropped out of this race, and we got 3 people crazier than him who I've had to fight before jockeying for position behind him. Where did I come from? Well, growing up, I was raised largely by my mother. She was a single mom, a nurse who had to pick up extra shifts at the ICU to provide for my sister and I. And I remember being the 8 or 9-year-old who was worried that mom is working too much. And it is not any easier to provide for 2 kids on a nurse's salary today than it was 25 years ago. And my dad, while he was getting his feet underneath him, he relied on food stamps to keep our fridge full. And thank God for that program, because it did precisely what it was supposed to do. It helped him get through while he earned his teaching certificate. And he is still Teacher Mick, teaching a bunch of kindergartners today. It is not any easier to provide for 2 kids on a teacher's salary today than it was 25 years ago. So I am running for people like that nurse and that teacher, people like that kid whose public services have been cut far deeper than they were before. Between those cuts and all the rest, I'm running for those union members, many of whom left the Democratic Party behind last election, who it is not too late to bring back. And I'm running because I think if we want to fix our government and make it work for working people, we ought to send a working person to Congress so we can fight for ourselves. Thank you.
And I neglected to say, of course, that Cecilia has at least one morning thing over here, and I'm glad you guys are able to use your peripheral vision to pick
We've done a couple of these.
Yes.
My right eye is kind of bad, actually.
All right, well, being a little informal, I guess we'll start with the question that Ryan submitted. That's the one that I selected.
Would you use the microphone?
Oh, okay. Sure. Yeah, okay. So, Ryan's question, what specific actions will you take to protect Montana's public lands and defend access and conservation efforts?
I don't know if I'll...
Tell you what, I'm going to... Is it okay if I don't, Mike? I'll be loud.
Use that one if you want.
It's all right. I can project here. No comments. Listen, the most egalitarian experiment on the face of this planet, the single best example of American exceptionalism are our public lands. All of you own 640 million acres. It's the only nation on earth where we trust ourselves as citizens to own this land collectively. And your tools to manage this land, you have selected ways to manage it. So you have representatives who you ask to institute laws, who then, those laws then direct management agencies, which we direct the Congress to fund so that we can manage and enjoy and profit from these immense public lands across mostly the western U.S., but all across the United States. And make no mistake, every facet of that equation that I just described is under attack right now. We're not funding our federal agencies. Every bedrock environmental legislation that we have fought for as citizens is under attack. The very idea of owning public lands is under attack, all from the Republican side of the aisle. And everybody on the right side, on the Republican side of this race and this primary, has called for the sale or transfer of public lands, in addition to dismantling all of our bedrock environmental legislation. So what has to happen right now are 2 things. There's lots of proactive things that we need to get done to strengthen and add to our public lands, like corner crossing, better access, lots of programs to improve wildlife habitat and management. But the first thing we got to do is stop the destruction. There's an arsonist at the door. We have to roll back this insidious Doge cutting that happened. We have to empower our federal agencies, trust them, empower our scientists, and we have to elect people who are in Congress who are going to stand up to this out-of-control executive. They're doing incredibly damaging things right now. The laws that you have put in place, they're gutting, they're rolling them back. A really good example, many of you know, they're trying to fast-track this Sheep Creek mine. This is a good example in the headwaters of the Bitterroot. The very worst place you could put a mine, 4,513 acres, right at the very head end of the West Fork. Should anything go wrong there, and something usually does go wrong in an industrial mining project, it would poison 75.6 miles of the Bitterroot River all the way to the Clark Fork. It would end up down here, right here. And they're fast-tracking that, meaning they're taking the legislation that you demanded through your representatives, and they're saying, we don't need that legislation, those protections. We're going to fast track this and remove all that so the industry can roll without any of the protections that you have demanded. That's the kind of evil that is happening, being propagated by this administration. I spent 25 years fighting for public lands. I've been board chairman of Montana Conservation Voters. I've been North American board chairman of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. I've testified to Congress multiple times. I've advised the U.S. Department of Interior and Agriculture, the U.S. Senate Sportsman's Caucus. I am in this because I care about public lands, and we've got a battle on our hands, and we ought to send back a champion who's going to fight for them, and I'd like to do that for you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to echo Ryan's sentiments here that this is a challenging time for Montana and the United States, because what we have done is seen ourselves get put in the position of this corporatocracy, I call it, where we have corporations who are the ones really calling the shots, no longer the people. And so really what we need to do is strip those efforts by those corporations back and put the hands back in you and I's decision-making power. Right now, what he was talking about in Sheep Creek at the head of the Bitterroot, I was in that meeting with commissioners and over 600 Bitterrooters there to stand against that mine in a bipartisan effort. Because what we see there is a gallium mine that's actually looking to be mined by an out-of-country corporation. They're a foreign entity. And so imagine you letting someone come into your house, take all of your assets, they don't pay you anything for it, and they make a mess while they're there. That's really what we're looking at. The only people that benefit from this are the ones that have interest in that company, be it foreign or not. And so in addition to rolling back the fast track program, my proposal is this. We need to put what I call a centennial bill in place. For 100 years, we cannot touch our public lands. We need to do everything that we can to preserve and protect them, to pass them down to the next generation. Because right now, our country is under siege by big corporations. And until we can get those corporations in check, we are going to struggle to make sure that they don't strip all of the assets out of the one thing that you and I all own, which is the biggest part of our assets, is our public lands. And so they're trying to privatize VA. They're trying to privatize Social Security. They're even trying to privatize the Postal Service. So this is not just a single-tiered attack. It is big corporations with billions and trillions of dollars coming in, trying to flex their muscle and make sure that they can milk every ounce of profit off of your and I's property. So that's what I would suggest is let's kick that can down the road for at least 100 years, make sure my kids, my grandkids, my great-grandkids can enjoy all these public lands that you and I do right out our back door here.
Well, we all love our public lands. Of course we do. We're Montanans. And what our public lands have meant to me living here is they're the place that even when I was working 3 jobs while I was going to the university, I could still squeeze in a Sunday afternoon and drive 30 minutes to a trailhead. And 30 minutes later be on top of a ridge. And public lands for a lot of people in this state are the place that we get food so we can fill our freezer and feed our families. And for a lot of people in this state, these are the places where we find our jobs and where we earn a dignified life for ourselves and our families. And a lot of what I've been talking about over the past couple of years, well, for the past year and a half, before I was even running, is the fact that our public lands are not just lines on a map. There are a whole lot of people working their tails off to make sure that these things actually work, that these land management agencies work, and those are a lot of the people who just lost their job. There are people like Kara, who was one of my union members who was fired 2 Valentine's Days ago with no cause and no notice, 15 years into her federal service, because she just happened to have taken a lateral transfer that year so that she could do a little bit more remote work while she was going through chemotherapy. It's people like our member out of Ennis, who was in line quite literally at the airport to go to his mother's funeral and got a text saying that he just lost his job that he was only making $16 an hour at in the first place. And we should be so angry that this is the kind of governance that we're receiving from our purported leaders in Washington. But being angry alone is not enough. We actually need to have a plan for how we're going to fix that, because that is what we're all running to do here. So when I get to Congress, what I intend to do is make sure that we are not going to pass a budget that does not fully fund our public lands agencies. And what I intend to do is fight for a budget that makes sure that nobody is making the sort of wage that requires they live out of the back of their truck when they're doing that. Because if we fully fund our public lands agencies, we save a whole lot of money on the back end. The most expensive way to fight a wildfire is to wait until it's actually burning. The cheaper way is to invest in good-paying jobs in our communities, actually stomping around the woods in advanced and engaging in active forest management. And what else? We have to make sure that we can actually get jobs that we used to have out of our lands, because we can responsibly harvest timber on our public lands. If we don't actively engage in the reforms that takes, well, we leave space for exactly what's happening right now. They gut NEPA, they gut the ESA, and they push these contracts through because we have not played a productive role. That's not the kind of congressperson I intend to be.
Okay, now we go to Russell's question. And what do you see as the biggest risk to Montana that this role could potentially have the greatest impact on?
So this could go a lot of directions, but the biggest existential threat to Montana that I see, and actually to this entire country, is AI data centers right now. What we are seeing on a broad scale is massive amounts of money being poured in to try and force in these data centers that ultimately will ruin our environment, ruin our economy, and ultimately we don't get a single penny out of it. Just one facility looking at being built over in the east, over 5,000 acres. It would use over 500 million gallons of water a day, and that one facility would use more than all of the residential electric in the state combined. And they want to put in over 10 of those in this state. We have plans in Butte, we have plans in Bonner, and here we are with our hands tied behind our back trying to figure out what the hell's going on. Well, here's the thing. When you ask, these companies say, well, that's proprietary information. And when you look at who's funding them, it's the same technocrats that are funding big business, that are doing the same things, trying to get access to our private lands, are trying to make money off of public services. It is the same corporatocracy that we see connected to the other issues that we have in this country. So, two things. We need to put a moratorium in place on these data centers. And what that means is press pause, because we need to better understand the electrical pole. How are we going to generate this type of energy without it costing you and I as ratepayers more electricity on our bills? We've already seen a 39% increase in this state over the last 3 years alone with Northwestern Energy. Can you afford it? I can't. We should demand better. We need those safeguards in place. Water's a big thing. It's the most precious asset we have, and we need to start caring for it as such. Using it in an exponential manner like these data centers are, we will regret it in 10 years. 550 million gallons of water a day to cool computers. I could think of a lot better ways to use that fresh water, and I hope you can too. Here's the thing that's not being talked about a lot. The sound created from these facilities. They create a sound wave sub 20 hertz, and that can cause organ damage if you're within 1 to 2 miles of these buildings. The facility in Bonner is literally right across the street from the school. Do you want to be sending your kids to a schoolhouse where we don't fully understand what that damage could do over the long term? So that is what this moratorium is for. My plan would be to put a special commission at the federal level in place to say we need a nonpartisan group together to come together and start studying these things of environmentalists, economists, and also those folks who are looking at the economic outcomes for our education sector, so we're actually training our kids to work in an AI field in an industry where AI is going to remove many, many jobs over the long term. We need to better understand these things, and the only way we can do that is to slow down and take the time necessary to do it right. That's the threat that I'm concerned about.
All right, Sam, 2 minutes.
Yeah, first off, agreed on that latter point. We should all be afraid of the speed and scale at which this technology is developing and that these data centers are being proposed to be built. And in Congress, I will fight for legislation that we urgently need to pass to make sure that these data centers are not allowed to be built if they are not providing all their own power, water, if they're not using good labor, because they only operate off of mining all of our data. That is how they make their profits. We should not be subsidizing all of that. If anything, we should be getting paid for it. More broadly, what do I see as the single biggest problem that we need to address in Congress right now? It is the obscene concentration of wealth and riches at the top, not just in this country, but in Congress itself. That is the problem that I see underlying all of the rest of them That is the problem that I see underlying all this division and all these broken systems that our Congress has failed to address. In a country where 3 people control as much wealth as 50% of the United States, that is not a functioning system. In a country where the average congressperson is worth 15 times as much as the average American, that is no way to be governing or running a country. So how do I fix that in 60 seconds? Well, we need fundamental tax reform. Because when I'm working as a smoke jumper, I pay 36% of every paycheck to taxes and all the rest. And if you are one of the 400 highest earners in this country, your effective income tax rate is 4%. That is how we've been forced into this mindset of scarcity. It's because all of us working people, we are carrying our own weight. We are paying our taxes. The folks at the highest levels of power and wealth in this country are paying a far smaller proportion of their income than all the rest of us. So we fix this by asking that they carry their own damn weight, just like the rest of us. How do we do that as a matter of policy? Well, I'm proposing a 30% minimum effective income tax rate on all forms of income, whether that is capital gains or wages over $1 million a year, because they can afford to do that if we can afford to do that. I'm proposing a wealth tax on wealth over $1 billion, because if we want to and need to pay for health care for every working person, we can do that with that sort of wealth, and because the public good is not served by that obscene concentration of wealth. And there's a whole lot more. You should check out my website because I'm going over time here.
How do you intend to reach out to labor unions and working people as part of your campaign? And how do you intend to make them part of your coalition in the general election?
You should have had everyone guess who asked which question. Well, obviously I asked the question, so this is core to my campaign, because I think it's important that we talk about it, because the actual underlying reason all of us are running, it's not just as a matter of what we hope and intend to do in Congress, it's because we think we can win, because the stakes have never felt higher. As was mentioned up top, that we actually win right now. It does not feel like we have 3 more years to wait while chaos and cruelty are reigned across this country and even overseas. And I would offer that the way that we win this year in Western Montana is we have to reach out to the voters who left the Democratic Party behind, because a lot of them felt left behind. Who did we lose last election? Well, we lost people making under $100,000 a year. Most of those people, folks like me, voted for Republicans. Folks like my coworkers. We lost about half of union members. The folks who used to be the base of the Democratic Party to voting Republican. And in the last year and a half, when I was fighting against those cuts and Elon Musk, when I was seeing a lot of my union members in the Forest Service lose their jobs and have their life turned upside down, I had a whole lot of conversations that involved me saying, why the heck did you vote for these schlubs? Look at what is happening. And the most common response that I got from my coworkers, my members, if I was asking that question, was the response, well, both parties are just the same. And that's an incredibly frustrating thing to hear when you were watching the human wreckage that is resulting from this last election. And on the other hand, when I heard that from my coworkers, I think what they were talking about is the fact that when you look at Congress today, well, the average wealth of a congressperson is about $4 million, depending on the day and depending on how good the stock market's doing. And that number is not any different for the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. And the average age of a congressperson today is 56 or 58 years old. And you know what? The Democratic Party is actually the higher of those two. And when people like my coworkers who are making $19 an hour jumping out of airplanes for the Forest Service, 20-some years into that job, are living in a community where you can't find a house for less than $500,000, well, they felt left behind because their life was not getting better on a material basis year after year. And I think the way we bring those folks in is to talk about the fact that that is actually precisely what our government is supposed to be here for. Government is not here to impose a worldview. It is here to improve our lives on a material basis when the market is not meeting a need. And right now the market is not meeting a whole lot of basic needs for people who are struggling to afford a roof over their head, and the least affordable housing market in the country, for people who are struggling to afford health care. After our congressperson let the ACA subsidies expire, and so a bronze plan is $700 or $800 a month for bad health insurance. People who, like my generation, cannot conceive of owning a home in this state sometimes, or cannot conceive of raising a family because the average cost of child care is $19,000 a year. These are all problems that are not too far beyond our reach to fix. And we have addressed crises like this before. We've had housing crises in this country, and the government came together and we fixed it. We have had a healthcare crisis, and people like Mike Mansfield brought both parties together with the support of working people and unions and created Medicare and Medicaid We have fixed these things before, and we can do it again. We have got to bring working people and unions and young folks back into the party if we want to do that. That's what I'm running to do.
Look, a big problem with the Democratic Party, and one of the reasons we've lost some working folks and union folks, is because too many folks in our leadership have a lot of words and not a lot of action. And I think, I pride myself on being an impatient person of action. And if we say we're going to do these things, then we must deliver them. And we must be the sort of party who calls out our own people for not doing it. We must hold our own party to a higher standard. And I think that's what working people want. When they say both parties are the same, they want a Democrat to stand up and demand action. I'm running hard for universal health care because I think we're 50 years behind the curve. We should have done this 50 years ago, and we should be realistic about the reason we don't yet have it. It's because too many Democrats have had their hands in the pockets of big healthcare insurance companies. Right? So I have a history of calling out my own folks. I was in the firearms industry. I'm a proud hunter and shooter, and I hunt and shoot with my boys every chance I get. And I'm also proud of calling out a powerful lobby inside the gun industry for doing bad things to our country. We need somebody with that kind of integrity and fortitude to look our own party in the eye and demand better, demand action. I will do that. I think that's what working people, that's what every American wants. And people on the other side of the aisle right now, little newsflash, they cannot criticize their own party, no matter how insane the ideas, no matter how destructive they are, no matter how many tariffs are laid over the top of northwestern Montana, no matter how many people lose their health care, all of these horrible things that are happening, they refuse to call out the administration that's doing them. We can put somebody in Congress who demands better of our own people and fights hard with people on the other side of the aisle to get things done. Then we will have respect from all people in this country. That's what we should be demanding. Thank you.
Our union culture became strongest on the coattails of one of the largest corruption eras in this country's histories, just shy of 100 years ago now. And here we are approaching that again, right? Keeps coming back to the same topic. We need strong unions right now, not to just support the working class, but because coming together is what it takes to defeat this ultra wealth. That was the whole idea of a strong union culture. When all of us combine, the power of us together is much stronger than any one of us alone. An old union sign of that was they'd take a pencil and you break it in half by itself. You take a whole bundle of pencils and it's almost impossible to break. That is what unions are all about. But supporting the working class goes far beyond just unions. Because right now, whether you're union or not, if you're a small business owner in this country, if you're self-employed, if you're blue collar, if you're a veteran, even if you're a senior, it's not enough. The wage suppression in this country is so severe that we've seen it almost flatline over the last 50 years, while productivity and profit have skyrocketed. And you want to know where all that money is going? Straight to the top. You have folks like Elon Musk that have figured out the tax loopholes of stepped-up basis where they can borrow $200 billion off of one company in stock, buy an entirely separate company like Twitter, and pay $0 in tax and double their wealth overnight. Yet you and I are paying 30 to 40% in income taxes, barely able to make a utility bill. So if you want to support working class, we have to come together. This fight is not left or right. Don't let them distract you of that. This is top versus bottom. And the top has gotten so fat that it is squashing the bottom. So invite your friends and neighbors to meetings like this one. I don't care if they're Republican. Great. Bring them in. Because they're people. And they're working just as hard as you and I. And it's going to take all of us to defeat this corporatocracy that we live in. Thanks.
Right now we've hit the point where we're going to take a 5-minute break.
I just wanted to tell you all thanks for having me. I'm sorry I have to bug out late, but we've got to put some miles under us to get there. These things happen, and they're, given the fact that we're doing these about every night, they're likely to happen to us sometime on the campaign trail here. But I just want to say I really appreciate your willingness to be here, to care about making the state a better place, to consider how important this election is. Of course, I'm here asking for the job to be your representative, but thank you for doing the hard work of democracy, because it's an uncommon thing that you're doing. I wish more people were doing it, but here you are doing it, so you should pat yourselves on the back. And thanks again for being here, and hope to see you on the trail here soon. So thanks for having us.
Thanks, Ryan, for coming.
Safe drive.
All of the questions were duplicative. I'm using that, and we got some interesting ones here. I think, and maybe we'll start off with this one to maybe add a little juice here. Of the Republicans running for this seat, which one do you think you can win against most easily? Why don't we start with Sam on this one?
That's a hard one. There's so many good options. I will say after the next break, there's only going to be one of us left here, so take your bets. And it'll be Russ because he lives here. No, I think we got a lot of great options here. Now that we got 3 people jockeying for his place, I haven't mentioned this, but I spent the last decade working between fire seasons doing organizing and advocacy for groups like the ACLU or groups where I got to work with Diane at the State Library Association, fighting back against Republicans like Al Olszewski when they wanted to zero out library funding because they didn't like the books on the shelves, fighting back against Republicans like Christy Jacobson when I was with the ACLU because she took it as her job as Secretary of State to roll back our voting rights and try to repeal same-day voter reg and try to get rid of satellite voting offices that a lot of folks on reservations depend on so they don't have to drive over 100 miles to vote. So we know how to beat these folks. I think Aaron Flint will be the most fun to run against because that guy has been spewing hate and hot air over the radio for the last decade plus while I've been actually doing the work here on the ground, and I cannot wait to meet little Aaron on the debate stage and say, Aaron, this is what doing the work in Montana looks like. Aaron claims he cares about public lands, but he supports this reorganization and dismantling of the Forest Service that is just another step towards state control and another step towards privatization of our public lands. I cannot wait to be on the debate stage with Aaron Flint and talk about what doing the work looks like. It's not just spewing hate on the radio and trying to get people more and more angry at each other and stirring up more and more division because people are tired of that. Because you can only be angry for so long before anger gives way to apathy. And that is a lot of what I think we saw last election. And actually doing the work does not mean just making people hate the other party more than you so they vote for you this time. That's no way to build a coalition or win an election. Doing the work means actually getting bills passed and showing people that government still has an affirmative role in making all of our lives better. Because if it doesn't, I don't know how the heck we get out of this hole. And I think Aaron spent a long time stirring up division while I have been figuring out how to work with Republicans and Democrats to get things like funding for libraries or homeless shelters passed, even when it takes 19 Republicans in the Montana House to do that. I don't think Aaron has the skill set it takes to build a big bipartisan coalition that it's going to take to win this. I do. That's what I intend to do and beat Aaron Flint.
Well, I think they're both the same wolf in different sheep's clothing, but anyone join me in Superior for the debate here a few weeks ago with Aaron Flint? I had fun wiping the floor with him then. I'll wipe the floor with him from June all the way to November. That guy's a shock jock that has nothing but hateful rhetoric coming out of his mouth, like Sam said. So he would be a fun one to go up against. But I do think Dr. O is a dangerous competitor. He almost beat Ryan Zinke last time, and he's got a lot of support right now. But here's the thing, is the viewpoints are no different. We're talking about super far right viewpoints that are not good for Montana. They're not good for America. The difference is he knows how to control his vernacular coming out of his mouth a little better than Mr. Flint does, who's been paid to spew them out on the radio for years. So either way, I think no matter which Democratic candidate advances, I think we're all going to clean house on these guys this year. They need to start speaking more to the values of Montanans. And interestingly, if you watch the debate from Mr. Flint here, what was it, 3 or 4 days ago, I think him and Dr. Al met in Bozeman, suddenly he's starting to say the same exact things we are, like banning congressional stock trading and doing apprenticeships in high school to get people workforce training and all this. I'm like, man, you're starting to sound like a Democrat, Aaron. What's going on? So maybe we're rubbing off on him. I don't know. Maybe it's working already, but I think he'd be a fun one to go head-to-head with. So.
Okay, now we're going to flip the coin a little. and I'll certainly agree with this. Our questioner says we have 3 great candidates here tonight. Did have, but we did have 3 great candidates, and all sound good. So this questioner wants to know, how do you differentiate yourself from the other 2 that are running for this office? We'll start with Russell.
Yeah, I consider myself an independent Democrat, and what that means is I am people, not party. I think what we've done is hitched our wagon to parties for too long, and that's caused us to do this as a state and nation. And so my goal is to bring us back, not necessarily to center, I have some very progressive views, but to a place where we can start talking and start treating each other like neighbors again. So how do I differentiate from these guys? To me, it's life experience. Some of it I would never wish upon them, with the loss of our daughter and nearly the loss of our youngest daughter as well, with a different rare lung disease once we moved back to Montana. We've lived through that healthcare hell, and I would never want anyone to go through that. But it gives me perspective on what needs to change, exactly what needs to change, both from a federal level and from a health insurance level, to actually start taking care of people. I'm a huge supporter of Medicare for all. I've been the one saying that from the beginning. We can do it. We need to do it in a way that includes vision and hearing and mental health and end-of-life care as well. I think that most people don't realize that that end-of-life care is more expensive than child care by up to 10 times, and it can absolutely cripple families, not just the people going through it, but their kids as well. And then I think professional experience as well. I'm the only one that has a combination of military experience. I'm an entrepreneur, a small business owner. I'm an executive that worked in corporate America. I'm also a high school coach and have had my fair share of time on the ranch. And so just being able to balance all those things, I'm a jack of all trades, probably a master of none. But what it does is make me relatable to Montanans, because many Montanans have done a lot of things throughout their lives. And so my goal is to use that experience to bring more people into our tent. That's the only way we can win. Democrats cannot win in this state by themselves. They're 39% of the vote. And so if you're going to get independents, if you're going to get moderate conservatives on board, you got to be able to speak their language and relate to them. And that's exactly what I've been doing for a year, and I'll continue to do all the way up into November. I don't care what party someone's a part of. My goal is to pass legislation that takes care of everybody. So, thanks.
Yeah, we've been asked questions similar to this before, and what I've been telling everyone everywhere we go is that we have 4 amazing candidates running for this seat, and that ought to be cause for hope for everybody here. And thank God, because it has been a long time since it felt like there was a lot of cause for hope in politics. Of all of us in this field, the 3 things that make me unique are my lived experience as a working person, my experience working with people in both parties doing the work for the last decade in this state to actually get bills passed into law on real tough issues. And the fact that I come from a background as a leader in my union at a time when we urgently need to bring union members back into our coalition, back into a part of what our base as a party is. My lived experience, I told you a little about up top. I know what it's like to be working 3 jobs while attending classes at the U and to finish my 3rd shift at 1 in the morning and still have a paper to write and still not have enough to pay for rent and think, this is not how it's supposed to work. And it's not how it's supposed to work. And that's how it's working for too many people in this state, in this country right now who voted both ways last election. And I know what it's like to be working, those 3 jobs at a time and be going from my 2nd shift on campus to my 3rd one at the Subway and Walmart as a sandwich artist. That's the technical term. And it was a heavy winter and driving past a car that had spun off to the side of the road, and I'm already 15 minutes late for my 3rd shift, and I've been late before. And thinking, I know I'm supposed to pull over and help that person, but I don't have time. And that is a terrible feeling. And there are a lot of people in this state, in this country right now, who do not have the time to extend the kind of compassion and empathy that we so desperately need to see from our fellow citizens to solve all of the bigger problems. I'm running short on time. As you can see, this is a habit of mine. I run late. The other experience, I've worked between fire seasons across the state, over at the state legislature. I worked for the ACLU, defending our constitutional freedoms. I worked for a coalition of homeless shelters that we built, helping make sure people had a place to stay. And at a time when we were losing union members, I have fought for my union members when their jobs are under attack. Thus far, this campaign is endorsed by everyone from Senator Bernie Sanders to over 30 elected officials here in Montana. That includes 4 Republicans. Those are the people that we need to win back. And it's not just them, it is non-unions across this state, across this country. That's the coalition I'm building. That is the coalition that we need.
This questioner asks, I turned 18 in time for the November election. What can you say to give me hope that voting matters? This country can turn around and give people my age a future worth fighting for. Sam?
I can say hope is coming. It is here right now. And I think that the message from that person's letter is a lot like the message I heard from coworkers that I mentioned earlier, who are living with a state of disillusionment that comes from being angry for so damn long and not seeing anything change. When life is getting harder to afford year after year, it's apathy, and it is a question as to what can our government actually do for us. And we just, to fix that, simply have to remember all that government can do for us. Because back when Democrats were winning in Montana, we used to elect people like Lee Metcalf, who changed the way that we manage our public lands for the better. We used to elect people like Mike Mansfield, who spent 8 years mucking in Butte, knowing what it is like to be a working person, and took that experience to Washington and quite literally ran the United States Senate and helped pass programs like the Great Society, programs like Medicare and Medicaid and NPR and PBS, exactly the public services that are under attack right now. And if we want to give people cause for hope in a politics that does not seem to actually address our problems as working people in this state, in this country, let's offer them a big, bold vision of how we can actually build like past Montana leaders did. Because we should not be cutting Medicaid to pay for a war in Iran that nobody wants. We should be expanding those services so that nobody is living with mental illness on the streets like a third of the folks are ending up in homeless shelters in this state as a result of all the cuts that we made to our mental health services in this state. We should actually be expanding Medicare to give everybody the option to join that program, because that is the only part of our healthcare system I see that works, and to make sure that it covers vision and dental and hearing, because that's what real comprehensive healthcare looks like. That is how we bring hope back into politics. And lastly, when you look at our Congress, and it seems to have stultified, it seems like there are people there who are just there to hold down a seat and not to actually pass bills into law. We need to show people that there is an opportunity for change here, and that Congress is not just a place for the rich and powerful, that is not just a place for people to go sit for 30 years, it is a place for working people. It is a place where we can actually fight for ourselves and affect change. That's how we answer that letter writer, I would offer.
I can tell you, we had a saying in the military. It's a little dark, but bear with me. It's democracy or death. When you look at countries around the world who don't have democratic systems in place where the people get to vote and exercise their will through that voting process, oftentimes it takes huge amounts of people coming together in violent manners to actually change those governments, to overthrow those regimes. And there is no more powerful task you have in this country, no more powerful gift you have in this country than using your voice through voting. I can tell you, as a veteran myself, tens of thousands of men and women have died to protect that very thing. There is nothing more vital to this country than our democratic process in voting. And so it's not just a gift, in my view, it's a duty. We have a civic duty to participate in our voting process. We should teach it in our schools. It should be a center theme in our schools. It should be appreciated by everybody and exercised by everybody. And it should be celebrated by everybody. And so I can tell you, if you're just coming into that, I have a senior daughter who's getting ready to graduate, and I think is probably thinking the same thing. what the hell is Dad doing driving around this state for a year, putting on all these miles? It's been an education for them. This is very important work, and it's very hard work. But we can take the power back and drive legislation that actually benefits people again. But we need the people to step up and actually exercise their civic duty and continue to vote for us.
Okay, Russell, the next questioner asks, how do you intend to curb the Peter Thiels and Larry Ellisons of the world from turning our country into a surveilled state?
Great question. And you guys are going to get tired of hearing from us because it's me and Sam. So here we go. We'll keep rotating. Those individuals are part of this corporatocracy that I'm talking about, but the surveilled state actually starts with post 9/11 legislation called the Patriot Act that allowed our government to start surveilling American citizens in defense of anti-terrorism, right? But what we've seen since then is the rise of corporations using that surveillance to benefit their own pockets. How many of you have talked about sunglasses or some other product, and then the next thing you know, every other ad on your Facebook is that exact thing you're talking about? That shouldn't happen. That's an invasion of privacy in this country. And so we need major overhaul, major reform of that system to reel that in. You should have to be able to be the one that says, yep, take this information and go with it. You shouldn't have to opt out of that. So to me, that's part of where the system is broken. The other biggest part of this, how we can fix this, is sitting right over there on a clipboard in her hands, called the Montana Plan. Montana is the first in the country to put forward a ballot initiative called the Montana Plan, I-194. What we have realized is that Citizens United passed in 2012. We've seen a 5,000% increase in corporate spending. A campaign like John Tester's that cost $2 million in 2006 cost $206 million in 2024. 96% of that was corporate spending. If you want to get that corporate spending out of your elections and put it back in your hands again, that is the ballot initiative that will do it, because we figured out in Montana that we actually hold a corporation's charter at the state level, and we depict what their rights are. So we can say, hey, guess what? You no longer have the right to participate in political spending anymore, and it is the most power ballot initiative outside of CI 128 last year. I would say this is the most powerful ballot initiative that we'll probably see in our lifetime to restore balance back to the people again. So please sign that if you haven't already, and then vote yes on it in November. Thanks.
I mean, I was so swept away by that great answer, I forgot the question. Can you actually
How do you intend to curb the Peter Thiels and Larry Ellisons of the world from turning our country into a surveilled state?
How could I forget Peter and Larry? I've had a lot of conversations fighting fire with fellow firefighters who would want to ask me about policy or politics because there weren't any other smoke jumpers that would go organize for the ACLU or for homeless shelters between fire seasons. And a lot of the time, some of my coworkers, some of the people who voted these schlubs into office that are really wrecking all of this chaos upon all of us right now, well, they would want to ask about whatever it is they saw on Fox News most recently. They'd want to ask about the latest bathroom bill, for example. And what I would tell them is that I read somewhere that Big Brother in this country is not watching you. Big Brother is singing and dancing. And when I go to the state legislature and they spend 2/3 of their time talking about where somebody's going to go pee, for example, instead of where you're going to work and how you actually put food on the table, that is exactly what they're doing. They're singing and dancing while they pick all of our pockets because they want to talk about the things that are not the things that bring us together. They don't want to talk about the fact that in 2017 they gutted our mental health system in the state and our healthcare system, and then when they had a budget surplus the next 8 years, did they reinvest in all those cuts to DPHHS? No. They cut the top income tax bracket year after year after year. And when I look at the federal government, it's the same exact story, and the scary thing is that right now they're not just singing and dancing. Suddenly they can also watch us at the same time. And that is a problem with urgency. That is a problem that means that when we win this election, and we will win this election, and when we win this seat, we're going to have the United States House, and God willing, we're going to have the U.S. Senate, but there's going to be a Republican in the White House. We need to actually pass legislation over the next 2 years, because we do not have 2 years to wait. While these technologies continue to develop at the speed and the pace at which they are right now, we need to find a way to actually reach across the aisle and to work with our fellow Democrats to pass regulations on artificial intelligence, to say that we need public oversight of a technology that could both cure cancer but also wipe out the human race. That we need oversight and regulation of companies like social media companies that know their algorithms just drive hate and anger and division, when it does not have to be that way, and we do not have to allow them to operate that way. We need to do that, and I think that there's the space for consensus on that if we can just remember how to speak across our differences towards the things that we still agree on.
Okay, we're going to go with just 2 more questions here, and then to wrap this up. We've talked a bit about public lands already, but this questioner asks, with over 80% of Mineral County land is federally managed with the recent Boundary Waters decision and the dismantling of the Forest Service, how will you fight the transfer of federal lands to the states to manage and ultimately sell off of public land? And yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, if I go first, it's easier to remember. It's been this is our 10th or 11th or something? I don't know. Yeah, this keeps coming up, right? This is something we all care so deeply about, and that we should. And when we look at the dismantling of the U.S. Forest Service, the cutting of the BLM and the Park Service, we should be so angry about that. And there are so many different ways to sell off our public lands. Selling the acreage is just one of them. Another way is to do what they are proposing to do in this budget, which is to cut the Forest Service down to 1/3 of its prior staffing levels. Because if you got 1/3 of the people managing all the same acreage, well, that is a hell of a way for them to do exactly what they did to other public goods, like public education. They cut it, they gut it, they turn around and they say, look, it's not working. We got a hell of a fire season. We don't have anyone to run planning and logistics on these large wildfires. I guess we got to privatize it. When they have a reorganization plan that's supposed to be about efficiency, and they cut 9 regional offices, like the one in Missoula, the historic regional office for the Forest Service, to replace those 9 offices with 15 state offices, that gives light to the lie that none of this is about efficiency. All of this is about an excuse and a step-by-step process to move our federal lands to state control, and to, just down the road from that, move them into private control so that they can use them as another source of profit for people like Senator Tim Sheehy, who is worth $150 million, the 3rd richest man in the United States Senate. And where does his wealth come from? Exclusively from federal and state contracts that all of us pay for as taxpayers, and that he votes to authorize and to approve as a United States Senator. The corruption is all out in the open right now. And we are plagued with senators and representatives who are among the richest in the entire country, in a state where we sure as hell are not. That is not acceptable. We have done so much better as a state than the kind of leadership that we have in Washington right now, and this is our chance to do better than that again. So how do we fix that? We say exactly what I said earlier. We're not voting for a budget that does not fully fund our public lands, and they should not just be fully funded. We should be talking more expansively about what it would look like to expand our active forest management, to expand our fuels mitigation, so we're creating good-paying jobs right here, and we're not waiting for a firefighter like me to watch more money drop out of the bottom of a large air tanker for Tim Sheehy's profits than I would make in a lifetime. That is the most costly and the least effective way to manage our forests and our public lands, and we should not stand for it anymore.
So I talked a little bit about that centennial bill. I think there's one other piece of this that we've discussed in prior forums that I would like to introduce to you. Donald Trump ran on America First, the strategy of convincing people that we would put America first. Yet here we are, and America's coming last. And the reason is because his definition of America First is corporations first. Corporations are doing quite well in this country. These layoffs that we're seeing from AI, we're seeing record profits already to the corporations because there's no longer people doing the work. So we have to flip this whole thing on its head and put it to be Americans first. It's very different. It's the people of America first, not the corporations. This is the same thing with the boundary waters and our public lands. Those are our assets. So I think we need to ban foreign ownership when we're talking about entities coming in, whether they're buying farmland or whether they're the Chilean mining company that wants to mine in the boundary waters there. That is the company that's coming in, getting all the profit, putting those waters at risk, and the American people get zilch. So it should be this check test. Does it satisfy this Americans first strategy? Is it for the benefit of the people of the United States? And if not, the answer should simply be no. And not just one or two people, the broader people. There are several of those top 10, 20 people who are doing quite well. But you and I, the people of Minnesota, elsewhere, the people of the Bitterroot for Sheep Creek Mine, which by the way is another foreign entity, are not going to do well from these transactions. Do we need some of these rare earths? Absolutely. But can we do it in a responsible way? Absolutely. As long as we put people first, and that includes our water and our land, corporations can come later. Thanks.
Okay, for a final question, I'm going to take a little bit of liberties here and maybe to change this question up a little bit. And that is, what bill do you think that you could get passed in Congress that these people would notice a difference in their lives after the passage of that bill? I'll start with Russell.
Yeah, my proposal is a 50-to-1 cap on executive to workforce wages. So I'm part of a coalition that I'll talk about here in a minute, but in changing what this looks like that would impact the people and our wages, we're looking at executives that are making $92, $94 million a year while their workforce is making $10 or $12 an hour. That should not happen. We need to cap that ratio to say, hey, look, if you're an executive, you can no longer make 50 times more your lowest paid employee in your company. So that if they're creating the productivity for you, you don't get to walk away with all the profit. That shouldn't be how it works. When we do that, this has happened in the past, it pushes the productivity and profit back into the working class. And even if you don't work for a corporation, what we see is those employees spend it laterally, which impacts our local economy, small businesses. It impacts real estate. People can afford homes again. They're doing improvements again. There's more people having kids. We see improvements to schools. There's higher property tax base. It's a unilateral increase because we're not absorbing all of that profit with a select few at the top. But the question should be, how do we get anything done when entering Congress? We're one of 435 people. So I'm proud to be part of 3 different coalitions, one of which I helped start, called Balance and Accountability. Those 300 people across those 3 cohorts, when entering office, even if only a third of us get elected, we're now not one of 435 or 50 or 60 entering Congress where we can actually get to work and get some of these initiatives done on day one instead of going through the meat grinder of Washington, D.C. and trying to figure this out on our own. The work has already started. And for me, that BAC group, all about balance and accountability, banning stock trading in Congress, term limits, a moratorium on lobbying the public service, universal code of ethics for our Supreme Court. These are all things that will restore integrity in Washington, D.C. And until we do that, folks, nothing else really matters because the corruption is so deep there that it's hard to get anything done until we start righting that ship.
Okay, Sam, what would be your specific?
Well, I think a common sense reform that we could get done this next Congress is to fix Social Security and make it solvent. We are in a system right now where because of the payroll tax cap on Social Security, the top 7% of this country pays a lower share of their income into the Social Security Trust Fund than all the rest of us. And that is real similar to the problems that plague the rest of our system of taxation, the rest of this economy. It's the problem that after you make $184,000 in a year in this country, you don't pay another dime into that trust fund. And that is precisely why we're looking at a curtailment of benefits in 7 years. Because our Congress people have not had the courage to step up and fix that. We should lift that tax cap. We should make sure that the Social Security people have been paying their whole lives into remains solvent. And I would offer that we should actually expand Social Security benefits. Because when I'm sitting in a mobile home 3 weeks ago with a gal who just got news that her lot rent is going from $530 a month to $970 this year, and that combined with the mortgage she's paying on that mobile home that she cannot afford to move is eating up 85 or 90% of her Social Security check, that is not enough. That's quite literally not enough to get by. And the way that we fix that is we ask everybody in this country to carry their own weight. And we ask the highest earners to pitch in a little bit more. Folks making over $400,000 a year can afford to pitch in enough to make sure that nobody is living on the streets as an elderly person in this country. That's not too much to ask, and I actually think that's the sort of thing we could get done working with Democrats and Republicans. Beyond that, because I'm going to use all that time I got, you know that. Beyond fixing Social Security, we need to pass legislation that actually shows people what government can do in a short period of time. Right now, communities across the state are dealing with the sort of economic impacts that you see when trail screws are going from 30 in Lincoln, Montana, where I started working for the Forest Service, to 3. That's where they were at the start. From 20 or 10 in the Bitterroot National Forest to 1 person for the whole trail crew, for that whole forest. That is money out of all of our pockets, out of our economy. Those are jobs out of our communities. Those are jobs that could and should be created by the government to make sure our public lands are effectively managed. Thanks for the extra time.
Now the candidates for a closing argument, and starting with Sam, and I'd like you to try to focus maybe on how you would win in the general election if you win at the primaries.
Yeah. Well, I'm a smoke jumper, so I got to tell you a smoke jumping story before I leave here. I'll try to make it quick. I probably jumped my last fire last season because I had to resign from the jump base about 4 months ago. You cannot be a federal employee running for public office like this. And the second to last fire that I ever jumped, it was late September. It was in northern Washington, right outside the Enchantment Mountains. It's beautiful, steep, rugged country, and we had jumped 3 fires in the last 9 days. So there's a lightning bust going on and a whole lot of new starts. And there's 6 of us on that fire, and at the end of day 9 straight, day 9 of 16-plus hour shifts, it's 8 o'clock and the sun is setting, and there's rain on the forecast, and 5 of us start talking that let's go back to camp and make some dinner because we're so tired and so hungry, and because the rain's coming. And the jumper in charge on that fire, her name is Cameron. She's the first gal to make it through the smoke jumper rookie training program up in Alaska in over 10 years. She got on the radio and she said, "No, you're not, because weather is not a firefighting tactic." Yeah, I didn't laugh. It was pretty frustrating, actually, because I was so tired and so hungry. And unfortunately, Cameron was right. Weather is not a firefighting tactic. And so we listened to her, not just because she was right, because she was in charge too. And we swung our tools and we ran our saws for another 3 hours. We made sure that 5.5 acres was fully wrapped with 18 inches of mineral soil, with a 3-foot saw cut, and that if the rains did not come, that fire was not going to jump our line. And right now, that is exactly what this political moment feels like. It feels like the rains are coming. It feels when you go across this state and people are coming to events saying, I voted for this guy, but my life's not getting any better, and now we're going to war with Iran and I'm paying $1 more for gas. It feels like there's a blue wave that is coming, but we cannot just rest on our laurels and assume that the rains are coming and this wave is going to come and run another election on the basis that you should hate this party more than us, and that's reason enough to vote, because it's not, and that is not a meaningful victory. A meaningful victory here that is going to hold this seat into 2028 and allow us to pass the kind of legislation we're all talking about here, brings working people and union members and young people and people of all ages back into this coalition. That is the coalition that I'm building. We have not had a union member running for Congress in this state in over a decade. That's going to end in this election. We have not had somebody coming from the working class serving us in Congress for too damn long when we got people like Tim Sheehy and Ryan Zinke purportedly representing us. That is going to change this election. That is how we win this thing. With a broad coalition of Democrats and Republicans, of working people and union members, of people from both parties who still care about the Constitution and the future of this country, and care about the fact that the government has an affirmative role to play in making sure that we are not struggling more year after year to pay for the basics. That is what we can do this year. And I would love your help with it. Thank you.
You can have 30 seconds.
Extra? Oh, I was going to say, still 2 minutes. Got it. It's like, mine's 30? Holy shit.
That's it. I'll give you 22 seconds.
Well, I got good news for Sam. He'll be able to start smoke jumping again come June 3rd. Because he hasn't jumped his last jump yet. But No, Sam's a great guy. Him and I share a lot of the same progressive views. I believe in universal health care. I believe in universal child care. I believe in getting dark money out of politics. I think we can do these things. We've seen even our neighbors to the south, Mexico, just passed universal health care last week. If Canada can do it, if Mexico can do it, we certainly can. We just have to vote out the guys who are trying to line their own pockets instead of actually take care of the American people again. We also need to quit financing everybody else's issues overseas, everyone else's forever wars. Start taking care of people at home here first. It's about damn time we do that. And that's what I'm proud to be running on. I'm individual contributions only. I believe we can win this election by burning the shoe leather. I've been doing it for a year now. I can tell you I'm getting turnouts of 80, 90 people in places like Dillon, 70, 80 just a couple days ago in Eureka. These are places where they are not all Democrats coming. They're half Republicans. Because it is going to take all Montanans to come together to turn the tides here and actually win again. And so that encourages me. There's a bright future ahead of us. I know Sam's got a bright future ahead of him. We're following on the coattails here of Ryan Busse, who ran for governor last year, or in 2024. This is the future of Montana here, one way or another. One of us will come out of this race, and we will win in November. But I know the rest of us have a lot of work to be done still moving forward out of this election either way. And so I'm excited. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be part of this team trying to find change here in Montana. We're ready to get to work. It's hard to differentiate us on some of our views because we all know what America needs. We've all gone out there and listened to Montana and tried to establish a platform that represents what Montanans want. So I encourage you to think about this. Who has the life experience to go out there and actually do the work? I'm the veteran, the small business owner, former banker, the rancher, the dad of 7. I have the experience to go out there and actually get the work done. And that's what's going to be important come September, October, when we're trying to convince people who are weary of a D behind the name to actually get out there and do the work in their best interest. So I'm going to keep grinding on your behalf, and I'd appreciate your vote. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Really great meeting you all.
There's one thing none of us have any more of, can't get any more of, and that's time. And I want to appreciate these people who are taking the time out of their lives to try to serve us, to try to make this country better. And again, I think we all know.
Thanks for the warning this time.
Okay, I just want to have a couple of thank yous. To Bruce Moats, our moderator. Great job, Bruce, and good selection of the questions. And thank you all for writing the questions. For Cecilia, who was our timer, very much appreciated. Also, Jesse Davenport for coming down from Alberton to circulate the I-194 petition, and if you haven't signed it, think hard about it and do so. And then also to the Mineral County Democratic Central Committee. As you know, that's most of us here. And our cookie makers, Cecilia, Linda Forrest, and Linda Shiflett. And please go back and have more cookies and a great lunch before you leave. And then especially to all of our great candidates.
2 of them.
All 2 of them. Who have spent countless hours, campaigning throughout western Montana, seeking to have the opportunity to make our country a better place. Keep us free.
We're going to do it.
Thanks, everybody.